tourism, and she joins us now via Zoom to tell us more about such funding efforts. Minister, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us, and a warm welcome to The Full View on SABC News.
Thank you. Good evening, and good evening to your viewers.
First of all, Minister, what are your impressions of how the government has fared in sort of aiding the small businesses, particularly in the rural and the township areas who have been severely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think we've done fairly well, despite the constraints we have in terms of the fiscus. You'd note that we currently facing difficulties where the revenue has literally gone down, and therefore we have little to do with more. And within the support that we've been able to do, both from the Minister of Small Businesses, providing support for SMMEs across the country, but also from what we did, I mean, we put up 200 million, and I kept on saying during lockdown, and as the time we were dispersing the money, that we know it's not enough for the need that is out there. So we do acknowledge that there is a gap. There are many SMMEs, that especially those in rural areas and in urban areas, that continue to suffer and that have not been able to access this relief that we provided as government.
And we certainly cannot overemphasize the importance that the important role that tourism plays in the development of the country's economy, and which is why your department is now leading the charge in terms of supporting the rural-based tourism initiatives, the rural tourist establishments, and the small businesses in the rural and the township areas. So take us through these fundraising efforts, Minister, and what some of these tourist hotspots are that you'll be focusing on.
Yeah, indeed. As I was doing my visits to provinces, interacting with stakeholders, for example, when I was in Soweto, I came across women who are in the tourism sector, running small businesses, B&Bs, tour operators, guiding, who are saying, Minister, we just battling to get the basics. For example, to get a mask for my staff, to get sanitizers. It's just a huge issue because they do not have operational costs. They have not been operating for months. And that's why this initiative, then after those engagements with them, listening to them, we went back with the team and said, you know, it doesn't help to just fold our arms and say, government does not have money, therefore we don't have a solution. So we thought, let's take an initiative to fundraise, do a golf tournament, and bring various businesses, individuals who are really committed to supporting women businesses, because this is about women, because we do believe that inclusivity is important. And because women businesses in the tourism sector have been hard hit, but because they've not been able to thrive. I mean, you look at participation of tourism in terms of gender parity, you'll find 70% are women. But as you grow in terms of the businesses, big businesses, leadership, you don't find them. And my concern was that I don't want them to perish during this time. And I would have to do something to be able to support them. That's why we came together with the team and looked at what we can do. And this today, since morning, we held a golf tournament where we invited various corporates, individuals who are players to come and play. And tonight we're having a gala dinner where we are, for example, auctioning as well art material from township and rural artists who are narrating the story of COVID-19 and lockdown. For example, one of the auction items that will go, it's a portrait of a photographer who took pictures during lockdown and narrates a story of loneliness during the streets when it was locked down. And another person is a woman who used to do his artwork using hairpiece, doing hair literally. But because during lockdown, they were not able to buy material because they did not have enough cash. And therefore, she had to use whatever was available for her to continue to do what she loves most, and converted that work into sort of painting. And we're narrating those stories as we do today. As we fundraise, we'll auction those items as part of fundraising. We're supporting those artists because they will get money out of their items, but also some of the proceeds will go to the women who are in tourism, SMME, and in terms of township, and rural communities.
I'm glad you touched on the issue of auctioning some of the products by some of our artists, and I want us to get into greater detail, Minister, of the pricing at the local level in just a moment. But the reality is that domestic tourism is the foundation of tourism in general in South Africa, and it takes place all year round as compared to international tourism, which is only seasonal. Now, has a study been conducted, Minister, which sort of juxtaposes the revenue that has been generated by international tourism with the kind of revenue that the local tourism brings to South Africa or to the fiscus? And if so, what were your findings, and what is being done to augment the revenue collection at the local level, seeing that international tourism has taken a huge knock and, the jury's still out on when it will be back in full force?
But data is available, including from Stats SA, in terms of the contribution to GDP by both domestic tourism and also international tourism. The difference in terms of, you'd find numbers are growing for domestic tourism. For example, previously we didn't have high numbers of domestic. If you compare, for example, to 2018, we had about 2.6 participants in domestic tourism, what we classify as domestic tourists in the country. In 2019, we were able to up that to 7.1. Now, it tells you about the movement. 2.1 was very, very low. Moving to 7.1, it says there's potential. Okay. But what is the difference with international is that international, the contribution to GDP is higher because the rent compared to euro, because they spend money by an international traveler, because they spend in euros, they spend in dollars, and when you convert it into South African rand, it becomes higher in terms of value. So these are the people who are able to stay, for example, in an establishment that would cost, in terms of South African rands, 30,000 a night. Because when you convert it into their euro, into their US dollars, for example, it doesn't matter, it doesn't mean much. But when you convert it to a rand, to a South African, you'll feel it's unreasonable for me to pay 30,000 per night for a person. So that's where the difference is. So data is available. I think what we need to do and what data tells us is that for domestic tourism to make a huge impact, we'll have to up the numbers, have higher numbers, then it will compete. So with domestic, for example, if international travelers are 10 million, so you'll have to have about 20 to 25 domestic travelers to be able to see the value in terms of comparison with the international market.
Now, the issue of pricing of certain products at domestic tourism establishment, Minister, has been touted about, and there's been complaints that the prices there are so excessive. And the argument has been raised that the international tourists who come to South Africa to visit have a much higher buying power than the locals. But the reality, Minister, is that tourists are ready to pay any reasonable amount, and much emphasis on the word reasonable, and if the tourism experience is of a higher standard. So should the locals be paying the same as the international tourists, Minister, and should the pricing at local establishment be regulated?
Look, the issue for pricing, I've been talking about it over the past few months, challenging the sector to start looking at the pricing for domestic market. Some of them have started to respond. For example, you have been showing in your clip in terms of reporting, Shalati, when I interacted with Tebe Foundation, Jerry Mabena, who's one of the leaders in that group, who said they have done a price differentiation. Price differentiation in the sense that, one, there's a price for international market, two, there's a price for domestic, but it's done a price for what is called a family price, which is for the employees to be able to enjoy the facility. Okay. So we are seeing quite a number of product owners who are responding to the call, but because we are currently in the process of policy review, we are hoping that as part of the policy review, this matter will be resolved for a long term, especially in the interest of South Africans.
Okay, just a quick one, Minister, before I let you go. The KwaZulu-Natal government has announced a possible closure of beaches as a result of a second wave engulfing South Africa. So how will that impact small businesses, especially along the Garden Route and especially at some of the country's beaches?
My understanding is that KwaZulu-Natal has not yet pronounced on the matter. I have interacted with the MEC responsible for tourism, MEC Pillay, who has indicated that the EXCO is meeting today. What the MEC responsible for safety was looking at options, possibilities that we need to think about. We are currently in the discussion at national as well. The issue is for us to be able to be reasonable, balancing the lives and livelihood. So such matters are still under discussion to looking at potentials, balancing the risk, but also not killing, for example, the economy. So once a decision has been made, we'll be able to communicate. And I think either the president will communicate the outcomes of the NCCC.
All right, Honourable Minister, thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate your update.
Thank you very much.
That was Tourism Minister Mmamoloko Kubayi-Ngubane joining us there via Zoom, and she's been giving us an update on the government's efforts in supporting rural and township-based SMMEs in the rural sector, as that sector has been the hardest hit by COVID-19.